Welcome, everyone, to the Clocking Out podcast. It's a show about people who share their own personal journey that include making bold choices to clock out of situations to follow their dreams of career fulfillment and to live their best, most authentic lives. I am your host, Raymond Lee, and this podcast could not be possible without the support of Career Minds. Today, I am incredibly excited and incredibly grateful to welcome Ila Edgar. Ila is real, she is human, and she is a trust expert. Ila is a firm believer that trust is the foundation of all relationships, including the one that we have with ourselves. She founded a company called Big Change with two other partners, which is a consultancy dedicated to partnering with leaders and teams to identify and overcome relational obstacles that impede their success. Ila's questions, insights, and advice about relationship trust can be heard on our twice monthly podcast called Trust on Purpose. Ila's heartfelt story is just so inspiring, and her life has so many big changes that I'm just incredibly humbled to share those with you today. So without further ado, please enjoy Ila Edgar and her Clocking Out story. Ila, welcome to the podcast. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's so delightful to actually meet you. And so looking forward to this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am so excited. For context, you and I connected through a mutual friend, Colleen Ham, who's based in Calgary. She leads our Canadian business for Career Minds. And I have to say, I'm so grateful for Colleen connecting the two of us. I had a chance to get to know you over the last few weeks and just so excited to learn more about your background and also the company that you've started called Big Change. And, it's really interesting, Ila, when I think of Big Change, I think about how as humans, as we sort of navigate our lives are full of changes, some small changes, some really big changes. And it's really interesting because I think big changes lead to opportunities. And so, without going forward and learning more about your company, I am just so excited to dig in.
Me too.
So what I like to do, Ila, is really, start from the beginning. Our listeners love an origin story and would love for you to share with us where you're from, where you grew up, maybe what mom and dad did for a living, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good. I was born here in Calgary, but very early on, my mom moved us to Victoria. So my mom and dad divorced when I was 3. And so I had the absolute pleasure of spending most of my growing up years in Victoria. I'm a hardcore ocean girl. Like, I love our Rocky Mountains. They're pretty spectacular, but give me an ocean any day, and I'm either in it, on it, beside it. So very fortunate to grow up a block away from the ocean. I was just there a couple of weeks ago, and when the plane lands, I can feel my entire body just exhale. It's like, oh, I'm home. Oh, I can relax here. I can exhale. My mom and dad divorced. I didn't spend a lot of time with him. My dad saw him for Sunday visits. That was about it. There's not a really big connection and relationship. My mom is turning 95 this year. Both of them were born in Hungary. Both of them lived through the World War, and both of them escaped from Hungary separately during the revolution in 1956 to come to Canada and start a new life. My mom arrived here with her brother, and whatever the reason was, she needed to be married in order to stay in the same city as her brother. And so she's like, well, who am I going to marry? And she had made a girlfriend on the trip. And the girlfriend said, well, I have a brother. Why don't you marry him? So my mom and dad met and got married.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. Um, so growing up in Victoria was lovely. Pretty early on, my mom answered the door. There was a fellow knocking at the door, inviting her to come and join a church and come and test out, what this church was like. Um, we went the next Saturday, and within a couple of weeks, our lives were completely different. So she embraced this church and the church community. And I think for her, it gave her a sense of belonging and maybe safety and community. And so she's still very much involved with that. But it also gave, a single mom raising three girls. I have two older sisters. I think kind of that security and that community that was really needed at a time when she really needed it.
So, Ila, what did your mom do for a living?
She worked for the government in Victoria in accounting, which was her learned profession. So that's what she went to school to do in Hungary. When our family joined this church, they didn't believe in being part of a union or paying union dues. Mm. And so after a struggle and trying to be exempt, they wouldn't let her out of the union, wouldn't waive union fees, which I don't really remember. I just remember the result of she left. So she couldn't work there anymore. Mm. And then it's a place, it's no longer, it doesn't exist anymore in Victoria, but my sisters and I have like huge memories around this place. It was a warehousey place that sold all sorts of things called Capital Iron. And anybody that grew up in Victoria in my era would be like, oh my gosh, I remember that place. And so she did accounting and finance work for them. And interesting point. So she didn't get her driver's license until she was 55. So we walked everywhere, or we took a cab. So my mom and I would walk. It was probably an hour for her to get to work. I'd meet her after school and we would walk home. Like I could walk. I'm sure that I've walked pretty much every inner city street, neighborhood area in Victoria over and over and over again. I know it like the back of my hand. And it's also where I learned how to walk quickly. You walk with purpose. You have somewhere to get to because that's the way she walked. There's no lollygagging. There's no stopping to smell the roses. We've got somewhere to go and we need to get there. So it's an interesting, I've never really put my finger on that before. So thank you for allowing me to tell that story, because that's like, that's where I got some of that.
Mm-hmm. That is so interesting, Ila. When I was just reflecting on what you just shared around the struggles that your mom had, and it was the two of you figuring things out. I can only imagine how hard it was for her to sort of kind of figure out her identity. Here's a person who is from Hungary, moves to Canada, is in a new country. She's recently divorced or separated, and she has three girls. Now she has one daughter who she's really trying to figure her place in the world, her identity. And at the same time, you're growing up trying to figure out your identity. And it's interesting how you both went through this journey together. And, it sounds like you were able to sort of start to think about like what's important for you in terms of your future, your education. And I can only imagine that some of her work and her experiences kind of impacted some of your decisions. So tell me about your first job. Like what was your first job where you were earning an income? And what was that like?
Oh gosh. It was a meat purveyor. So they sold meat to restaurants. And I answered the phones, whoever walked in and out of the office, which not a high traffic office, way down by a Blackfoot Trail. And I learned some basic accounting in a day where we still used typewriters and the carbon paper in between. So I'm very much dating myself, but it was.
What year was that?
Oh God, 1995, 94, 95. And the owners were lovely people. They were so kind and generous and taught me so much, like so much. And then I lived downtown Calgary. Didn't own a car. I walked everywhere. That's what I'm used to doing. And came across this lovely store called Bernard Callebaut. And my next job when I left the meat purveyors was I was an admin assistant to Bernard Callebaut and his then general manager. And so I'm not a big chocolate person, but that's pretty damn good chocolate. There's always a bowl of chocolate in my fridge. My friends really liked that. And there, same thing, admin, support, answering phones, taking notes in meetings, all of these administrative type duties. But I loved working. That was like one of my favorite places.
What was it about the admin role, the receptionist role, that inspired you or made you feel fulfilled in terms of the work that you were doing?
I like being in control. I like being organized. And I like being the point person. So whoever had a question, whatever need they had, if I didn't know the answer, I could sure as hell find it out.
I love that. So what was what were your goals in terms of where you were seeing yourself grow from there as far as your future in the working world?
I'll say honestly, back then, my goal was, how do I earn a little bit more money so that I'm not living paycheck to paycheck? And there's a lot of things that happened back then that we'd probably need a whole other conversation to dive into. But there were years that were really about freedom for me, freedom and choice. I didn't have a lot of that growing up. Experiencing life in a way that I really wasn't allowed. And I don't want to, the environment that I grew up gave me really, really, really strong morals, a really strong foundation of being in service of others, being kind and generous. But it was also very confining and very restricting. So, no dancing, no drinking, no smoking, no jewelry. I didn't wear jeans, and I think until I was 16, 17, 18, we weren't allowed. Couldn't paint my fingernails, there was a lot of rules. So I think those early years for me were really about, I can eat whatever I want for dinner, or I don't have to be home by this time, or I can wear this outfit and I'm not going to get in trouble for it. Or I can paint my nails, or I can have 3 piercings. Again, not things like, if my kid were doing these things, I'm like, have at her. That's normal. Express yourself. But in the environment, in the home that I grew in, and the church community I grew in, these were all like bad. And not bad behavior, but you are bad. And it's taken years to be able to separate the two. That those things don't make me a bad person. In their eyes, they were just bad choices. But for me, it was like, oh, I'm expressing myself, kind of we talked about earlier.
Mm.
Freedom to be who you are and express yourself.
Yeah. I can't, I can only imagine that kind of impact. And I feel like as a person starts to really understand their identity and what's important to them, it's hard to break out of that structure that
Mm.
that you grow up in. And so, Ila, when was the moment when that light bulb sort of went off for you, when you
Mm.
realized that I am worthy? Because that is, so many people are in that place today and have been in that place where they feel like they're not worthy. They sort of have that fixed mindset where they
Mm-hmm.
are where they are and they feel like there's nowhere else for me to go. And I'm not worthy to grow any further or get that promotion or whatever the case may be. When was the moment when that light bulb went off and you said, I am worthy?
Mm. Great question. I worked as an executive assistant for a small oil and gas company. So I had moved up in admin roles. So I supported the president, the VP finance, the VP marketing. I went for a walk for lunch, and I went somewhere that I don't usually go. And I bumped into someone that I had worked with years before, but I hadn't seen her for a really long time. I don't believe in coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
And she said to me, "Oh my gosh, I was just thinking of you. I just interviewed for a position. I'm not interested, but I think it would be great for you." And she told me a little bit about it. And immediately, I remember the feeling. There was like, oh, that sounds amazing. I'm like that full body, just that lift, that
Mm-hmm.
possibility. This is, oh my gosh, never in a million years would I think that this could be possible. And so I took action. Even though I was very comfortable where I was, I really loved the team that I supported. But there was a somatic experience for me in hearing what she was telling me about that
Mm-hmm.
just went like, if I don't do that, this would be a big regret. And yes, I think that I would, like, I already had the position in my mind. I was already part of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the startup of WestJet.
Wow. So it sounds like the feeling of not pursuing the opportunity and the regret that you would feel because this opportunity was so massive that outweighed the insecurity that you were feeling of not being worthy.
Yeah.
And it was so big and so obvious that it was like, I need to make a choice. I need to lean into this opportunity because if I don't, I'm going to regret it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can just
Mm-hmm.
feel the the magnitude of that pivotal point where
Yeah.
it was like, it was almost like you were called toward that opportunity and you listened, which is
Yeah.
great. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I remember talking about it with my husband and talk like, this is risky to leave an oil and gas position, very stable, like great environment, and to go do something that might not work. And even through that conversation, it was still a full body yes. Like, of course I'm going to do this. Of course this is where I'm meant to be. I can't turn this down. I can't walk away. And thankfully I
Mm,
didn't. And I got the
yeah,
job.
that's fantastic. So tell me about WestJet. What was the role? What did you love about it?
When I started, it was an admin role. There were only a handful of people in an office building downtown that Clive Beddoe owned. So we weren't even, there was a binder and a business plan when I started. Was building furniture with, the heel of my shoe as a hammer. And as things progressed, we hired people, we needed more space, we started, actually building an airline. I was able to move through so many different roles and support in so many different ways. So, one day I've got a hat on for supporting our director of HR and talking to benefit providers, uniform providers, like, how are we going to do this? And we need to start writing some guidelines and policies to, take that hat off. And I'm supporting the maintenance director with, I've got to find this person and source this and do this and everything in between. So it was great because I loved being able to be part of so many different aspects of the startup.
So for context purposes, Ila, this is WestJet is a Canadian-based airline, commercial airline, and they were just launching. So you were one of the first employees hired with the company.
Employee number 8.
Oh my gosh! Wow. And what year was this?
WestJet launched February of 1994.
How fascinating! Like, how fascinating is that to be employee number 8 on the ground floor, no pun intended, and you're part of a new brand and the launch of this new brand. How exciting. And you mentioned earlier, Ila, that there was just a world of opportunity. So what other roles did you do at the company? You said you worked in human resources. What other things did you do?
So part of being one of the many hats I wore, we needed to hire flight attendants, customer service agents, call center. So the director of HR is like, we need help with interviews. Do you want to learn how to do that? So I did. We needed to have a flight attendant training program approved by Transport Canada, but you needed people to go through the training plan or training program so that Transport Canada could observe. So I'm like, sure, I'll become a flight attendant. I'll go through the training program. Then once you're a certified flight attendant, you've got to maintain your flying hours. So at least once a month, I'd be flying. So moved from HR positions, manager in flight. So flight attendants reporting on the admin side, not the technical side, because I couldn't hold a Transport Canada position like that. I also did project management. So every time there was a new destination launched, I had a team of people that supported me to go to that new airport, talk to the airport authority, logistics around signage and counter space and hiring. So I had the opportunity to work through a number of different roles. I supported Clive for a period of time in the board of directors. So yeah, I got to do a lot of different things, which is great. I loved it. Loved it.
How long did you work for WestJet?
5 years.
Yeah, the way you're describing this, Ila, is you did not say no to an opportunity. It sounds like you started out on the ground floor. There was just so much opportunities. This airliner was growing so fast, and anything that was presented your way, you signed up for it. It sounds like you got just a tremendous amount of experience. What ended up happening?
Well, as the airline grows, you have to start letting things go. You couldn't have your fingers in all the things that you have all along. And so a little bit of that was hard. And it was also a realization for me that I love the build. Like, I love the build, the chaos, all of the moving pieces and making sure that they all stay together. But once things are kind of stable and normal and it's into day-to-day operations, it's not really my jam. It's not really my jam. And so at the point when I was considering what the future looked like, I had a few choices of the roles that were being offered to me. And because I was in project management at that point, the number one project ahead was moving into the brand new building when they had built their first head office. And I don't know about anyone else, but that was like, you're sucking my soul out if you want me to the logistics of people moving and furniture moving from 5 different buildings into a head office sounded not fun in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So it was a choice of that or flying the line full time as a flight attendant. Those were kind of the options that were being presented. Neither of which really made my heart sing. And again, knowing like I learned so much, and I loved the constant being challenged. Here's the next thing. Now you've got to learn about this. Now you've got to learn about this. And I didn't really want to settle. And so it was a really hard decision. There's a couple of other things that influenced the decision. But it was my time to let go.
Wow, that's great. So many life lessons there. I think as companies expand and grow, there's always a contraction. And in your situation, I can only imagine how hard it was to walk away, where you're presented with some other opportunities. And it sounds like the company really valued the impact that you were having, all the work that you were doing. And I think the life lesson here is that really recognizing, knowing when it's time to quit. I think that there's often so much emphasis on grit and staying the course and grinding and, not walking away. And the fact that you recognize, like 5 years later, you did great work, and the 2 roles that were presented to you just weren't in the cards for your future. And kudos to you for recognizing that and walking away from it.
Thank you. It's not easy. And I would say over the years, there's been moments of like, maybe I should have stayed. Maybe. But I'm also, I think, one of the gifts that my mom did give is being really resilient. And so, you just land on your feet. What's next? Go try it out. See what happens.
That's great. And so you actually left with nothing to go to.
I had something in mind, and it was very different. And so I jumped into the world of recruitment and worked for, at that point, the world's largest recruitment advertising firm, which was very different than anything that I had ever done.
I love that. I love that you didn't go to work for another airline. You probably picked up some recruiting skills and some interviewing skills when you were at WestJet, and you took those transferable skills and you made a pivot. You went into another field. And how long did you work in recruiting?
That was many, many years. So the bulk of my career was spent in recruitment. So recruitment advertising, recruitment technology, leading teams. I did actually work for another airline. I worked with Air Canada's low-cost carrier recruiting. And so many, many years spent in anything to do with recruiting. I've probably touched it, done it. And I think the thing for me is I'm insanely curious about people. I had been many times called the queen of declines because I could actually let someone know that you didn't get the job and not make them feel horrible because they didn't get it. But here's why. Here's either the gap or what was missing, or we had 2 fantastic candidates. You did everything that you could. it was just really came down to a tough choice.
Hmm.
And so again, like, and I think this filters into the work that I do now, is being able to hold people with respect and dignity. Even when they're receiving something, whether it's feedback or news or a decline, that it's not what they want, but it's a message they still deserve to hear. And this is like my irk is when you've interviewed for a job and you never hear anything, you get ghosted. I'm sorry, that's just not okay. Not okay. But I find that it's often where I've bumped into it is the recruiter, the hiring manager doesn't know how to deliver something that's not, yay, you got the job. And so they just avoid it and they don't say anything. And the impact of that to the person who's so excited about the opportunity is pretty impactful.
That's amazing. I love how you just articulated how the recruiting world has to work in terms of you're not just about finding the right candidate for the job, but you're also, there's a human side to it, right? Like if someone's not the right fit for a job, you're spending an equal amount of time helping them get better and providing them with feedback that will allow them to get better, or
Yeah,
giving them the opportunity to get new skills that maybe they didn't have for a role that they were applying for. Feedback is so
right,
powerful. And so the
right.
fact that that you provided individuals with that feedback, I think is great. So Ila, in terms of your journey, you worked for in the airlines industry. It sounds like you spent a little bit of time in higher education. You were in recruitment agencies. When was the moment when you decided that working in sort of the corporate world wasn't a thing for you and it was time to tap into your entrepreneurial spirit and essentially go out on your own?
Great question. While I worked for the University of Calgary, or when one works for higher ed, there's often tuition support. So opportunity to take different courses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember one day, one of my team members came in and said, I'd really like to take this course. I need you to sign the tuition support form approving this. Great, no problem. Happy for you. And as she was walking out the door, she said, I don't know why, but I think you would really enjoy this course. You should take it too. Without a word of a lie, I didn't really even look at the course description. I saw the name. I had my VP sign off on the tuition support form. And a couple of days later, I showed up into a program that I had no idea was formal coach training.
Wow.
And within 3 days, it had literally changed my life. I never intended that. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm going to become a coach. I'm going to put a shingle out. This is what I'm going to do. I thought, well, okay, I'm here. It'll help me be a better leader. And absolutely it did. But in that training, and it was over the course of a year and a half, one of the senior faculty members and another one of the participants and I became to be quite close friends and thought we should form a business together. We should do this thing. And here's how we would do it. And we spent hours designing and declared that yes, in fact, we would go do this together. And so I didn't come up with the name Big Change. Dan did, one of my partners. And we thought, that's great. I love it. And off we went. Within a couple of months, Big Change had a big breakdown. So something happened that caused the future as it had been designed to no longer be possible. So Dan stepped away, and Mona and I had a conversation about what are we going to do? And she said, well, I was tied to how it was going to be. That's what I was willing to put my energy and time to. And And because it's no longer going to be that, I'm also going to step away. And so then I was left with, the hell am I going to do? So I chose to stay and embrace big change as my own. And it's now been just over 10 years, 12 years. And it has gone through many iterations, many big changes. And it's currently in the middle of another big change, because why not?
Wow, that's so inspiring. I have to be honest, when I was doing my homework and reading about your story, and I was looking at the name Big Change, I couldn't help but think for you, it was a big change from going from working in higher ed or working
Yeah.
in the corporate
Yeah.
world to
Yeah.
launching this new business. And it's like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Anyone who is interested in pursuing a different career and leaving something very stable, like that is a big change. But the real big change came from when your two partners walked away from the business and left you as
Yep.
the sole owner of the business to take it forward. That was really the big change. How ironic is the name of the company, The Big Change?
It's not lost on me. I giggle about it often, actually.
I love
And
that.
I had no idea how I was going to do it. As we had been designing, there were really clear and specific roles that each of us would take and how we would contribute. And now all of that was up to me. It was terrifying and exciting and invigorating and energizing all at the same time.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting back on the beginning of our conversation when I talked about how life is full of big changes. And they're not just career changes and career pivots. It's really every day in life presents itself with some sort of change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no constant. And, to the extent you can sort of put yourself in and create a mindset that recognizes that you either have to recognize change and be ready to adapt to it or learn the skills to react to change in a way that's going to keep you on the course. And so I just love the name of the company. And I wonder how you said you went and got your coach certification and you do coaching with individuals. How do you sort of apply your methodology, if you will, to help coach people? Are you helping people with navigating through big changes
Mm-hmm.
and helping them build the skills? Tell me a little bit more about
Mm-hmm.
your work in the company.
Um, in the early days, definitely one-on-one coaching, a little bit of facilitation. I would say in the last probably 4 or 5 years, it's not really what I focus on anymore. I do very little one-on-one coaching. I think where magic happens and where my heart just like explodes with excitement and possibility is being able to work with intact teams. Or I have a few organizations that I work with that are small, and so there's impact in the entire organization. More and more of the last few years, my work has focused also to how do you build, maintain, repair trust. So it can be and feels like such an elusive topic. We all know it's important. We all try and build it and be trustworthy, but because it's so elusive and subjective, like how do you actually do that? And then layer on that we each have our own relationship with trust. So how I build it, how it matters and looks and smells and feels to me is very different than how it would be with you. Some of us extend generously and freely, and others take a long time to build. And neither of those are right or wrong or good or bad. But if we don't know what our own relationship is, and specific behaviors of how we extend it or language around it, we're really just bumping into life and hoping it works out. So I spend a lot of time working on understanding trust. There's a model that I love. It's the Charles Feltman Thin Book of Trust. He's also my podcast co-host. But there's so much. I joke a little bit that I wear trust goggles because I see how so many things are related to trust. And others just like, trust has got nothing to do with that. It's just an employee engagement survey, or, it's just a change we're rolling out. Or it's like, but trust is part of this if you want it to be, and if you can be intentional about it. And then the result on the other side is that you've actually built stronger trust because you've talked about it, planned for it, been intentional about it.
So Ila, I want to go back to the moment when your two partners walked away from the business. And I love how you're sort of describing this trust component that you focus on with your clients. And I just wonder, how did you decide that you were going to trust in yourself and really continue with the business as a solo entrepreneur, as a solo business owner? Like, I can only imagine that there was a question that popped in your head. Like, when there's three of you, two of your partners have decided they're walking away from the business, right? There's a lack of trust that maybe they were having in terms of where it was headed, or there was some sort of reason why they were walking away, which really isn't important. But I think the important thing I'm curious about is, why did you continue to go forward with it?
I think because I really believed in what we were trying to do and what we wanted to do. And as scary as it was to be doing it alone, I also knew that I wasn't alone. I still had a network of support around me. I have fantastic people in my life. Probably in those early days, not as confident and didn't ask for help as much as I do now. But I knew that whatever came about, I could figure out. It felt possible. It felt doable, even though I was wildly out of my comfort zone and definitely didn't have all the tools that I needed in my toolbox. But it's like, what's the worst that could happen? So it doesn't work out and I have to go get a job. Okay. Like, I guess there's Amy Edmondson has her new book, I think it's Failing Forward. And there's this video that about a 7-minute video she has about designing failure. And I wish that I had this language, or that I could have pointed to something like this back then. But there's a clip in this video, and it's Julia Child live on TV, and she flips an omelet and misses the frying pan. And her response is, it's just an omelet. It's just an omelet. And I think what I have learned, and maybe the spark of it or the beginning of it happened back then, was it's just an omelet. Like, figure it out. And when you need to make a different decision or a crossroads happens, okay, well, then you make a decision. Until then, show up, be human, do what you love, figure it out.
I love that. I have to watch that video.
I'll send it to you. It's really good.
Yeah, I appreciate
it's
that.
Really good.
It's a constant reminder that the world is small, and the things that matter the most are really, like you just said, it's around being human, doing what you say, being trustworthy, leading with integrity, all the things. And at the end of the day, it's just an omelet. I
It's
love
just
that.
an omelet. It's just an omelet. You figure it out. Yeah.
So, Ila, I have just absolutely loved our conversation. I mean, this has been great. Thank you so much for showing up here today, and just really just delighted to get to know you. What's the best way people can find you and your work?
Great question. People can email me, ila@bigchangeinc.com. I'm actually taking a bit of a pause. So
Mm-hmm.
my website has been taken down. There's a landing page only.
Mm.
Life brought another big change. And I realized that the most courageous thing that I could do was to stop pushing so hard, because I can,
Mm.
and actually put myself first. So
Mm.
I'm focused on creating some spaciousness, time to breathe, being more intentional about what I say yes to, and being really clear about what is no longer aligned with what I want to do or how I
Mm.
want to be. So I welcome emails. I love to hear from people. Like, I'm truly delighted. I don't believe in coincidence. So whoever is inspired or feels the call to reach out, like, please do. Don't hesitate.
Mm.
We didn't talk about this a lot, but or didn't talk about it at all. But I am also navigating cancer for the second time.
Mm.
And so big changes, right? Life brings stuff. And all of the things that you and I talked about today are absolutely true. And when a health bump is right here in your face, I've chosen to not, I'm not bitching and moaning about it. Like, why me? Rather, what's possible while I navigate this. I'm not a warrior. I'm not a survivor. I'm not fighting. I'm choosing, I call them my tenants. I have tenants. I'd like to give them an eviction notice at some point, but I can also cohabitate.
Mm.
And so, how do we do this? Is my body. This isn't some foreign thing that's just planted itself. This is my body. And so, how do I navigate with love, with compassion to myself for the experience that I'm going through, sharing a little bit of my story where it's helpful or relevant, but also, and I say, sorry, this is really my dark humor. I could literally choke on a hot dog tomorrow. It may not be cancer that takes me out. And all of us, we don't know. We have no idea when our time will come. So what are you doing today? How are you living your life today that fulfills what's important to you, or how you want to leave the world, or what impact you want to make, or what kindness, or I have hearts on my desk all the time. Like, how do you want to leave more love, be more human in a world that really needs humanness and connection?
Mm.
How do you want to do that? And so for me, I don't worry about, like, how do I scale my business? How do I make more money? How do I do these things? It doesn't matter to me right now. What matters to me is, can I model being human, being scared and brave in the exact same moment? Can I spend time with another delightful human, having meaningful conversation? Is there someone that I can help along the way? Great. Then it's been a great day.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you for the dose of reality. I feel like we all need reality checks where, like you said, you could wake up tomorrow and the unexpected happens, whether it's health related or an accident. And life is short, but life is long.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in a situation where you're not feeling fulfilled in the work that you're doing, like truly fulfilled,
Mm-hmm.
your story is incredibly inspiring. And I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing it here and with me. It's certainly, it's such a inspiring story and inspiring message. So I appreciate that. My heart's with you. I wish I had a heart here to share it with you, but I have a heart here.
I'm going to send you
it's
one.
with you.
I'm going to send you one. There's this lovely lady that lives here in Calgary, and she knits these for me.
Oh.
So no two are alike. And I just emailed and said, I need another 250 hearts because I sprinkle them everywhere.
Oh, so, thank you for that. I will keep it right here, near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Well, Ila, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. I will include your email in my, in my postings and things like that, because I'll encourage people to reach out to you. But thank you again.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. And also thank you for being a real human with heart and care. I felt that through our emails, and 1,000% felt it here.
Oh, thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Hello, Raymond again here. Thank you again to our sponsor, Career Minds, a global provider of outplacement and career development services. If you'd like to connect with me about your own personal journey, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, as well as find me on Instagram at raymondlee.co. Until next time, remember, if you're stuck or unsure of your career or future and you think it's time for a change, ask yourself these simple questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that matter to me most? And am I creating value for myself and for others? Until next time.